Okay, so we're back for part two. If you didn't see the first part of this video, check it out. No, continue what you're saying.
Yeah, what I was talking about is the fact that all of the radical leaders, the leaders of the radical movement in the 60s, were serious. We were serious students. You know, we were voracious readers. You know, we saw that all of the revolutionaries, you know, the people who we admired and who were role models, they were all very serious students. They were serious intellectuals. They wrote, you know, they read very widely. So we all, like I said, the proof of how serious we were as intellectuals is at the end of the 60s, when it was clear that it was not going to be a revolution, we all became college professors. You know, I was the first of the lot to become a college professor. But me, Max Stanford, Maulana Karenga, Huey P. Newton got a PhD. You know, he died before he got killed, but he was destined to be a professor. He had a PhD. Bobby Seals ended up teaching at the school he was at when we first met him, you know, at Merritt Junior College, you know, and you can go on and on. John Bracey, you know, who was the head of RAM in Chicago, he just died. He became a professor, you know, because we were all very serious students. You know, this anti-intellectualism that pervades the hip-hop culture, that wasn't us. You know, that's a step backwards. You know what I mean? They're not our counterparts. You know what I mean? They represent, you know, the wreckage. You know, what happened after the real movement was destroyed by the COINTEL program, by the counterintelligence program of the FBI. You know, this is what eventually emerges as a spokesman for youth afterwards. They were not our counterparts. They're nowhere near on our level. All that kind of decadent, you know, stuff that they were there was some smart ones in there, you know, but they were not on the level of the black radical youth, you know, of the 1960s, you know, and that's very easy enough to demonstrate that was not true. Because, you know, Queen Mother, when she first began to instruct me, she told me, she said, you know, you need leisure to study, you know. You need to consider your leisure time very carefully, you know, and so that you will have time to study. You know, you must study. And she's the first time we ever met, she gave me books, you know, and I was always a study. I was already very studious when I met her. That's how I met her, you know. But then she started instructing me in the revolutionary theory and practice, in the history, you know, the revolutionary left. Now, she also introduced me to people. Like I said, she introduced me to John Henry Clark. She introduced me to Ben Jacobin, whom people call Dr. Ben now. But this was in 1962, you know. I met them very early on, you know. She introduced me to Baba Nana Osurjiman Adefumi I, who was the founder of the Yoruba nation here. You see all these people practicing the Yoruba thing. It was Nana who introduced the Yoruba religion here among Afro-Americans.
Nana sounds Ghanaian. Was he Ghanaian? He was a Ghanaian.
No, this was the name given. This is Baba Nana Osurjiman Adefumi I.
Okay.
This name was given to him in Ile-Ife, you know, the home of the gods. Before he came along, the people who were practicing some form of the Yoruba religion were all Santeros. They were all coming from the Cubans, Afro-Cuban Santeria. Yeah. You know, he was the first one to bring. He got his priesthood in Ile-Ife, in Africa itself, in the home of the gods, in West Africa.
There's a difference between those practices here.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah. But it is absolutely. For one thing, we talk about the differences. Well, first of all, I was introduced to the Yoruba religion through Osurjiman, right? Through Nana. Queen Mother was atheist, instead of saying, but she understood that religion, you know, played an important role among black folk. And her thing was, if you're going to be religious, forget that damn Jesus stuff. Instead of saying, let's find out what you're real. And she felt the same way about Islam, which is also not an indigenous African religion. She wanted us to know what was the real religion of our ancestors. And when you see these people running around talking about we were Jews and all that kind of stuff, if you want to see what the religion was of our ancestors. That is the black populations of the Americas. All you got to do, you can look all over the Americas. You see the result in Brazil, what they call a candomblé in Brazil. You know, what they call a voodoo in Haiti. You know, what they call the Shango cults in Trinidad. You understand? You know, Bumba, you know, in among Puerto Ricans.
No,
you know?
no, Bumba.
Not Bumba.
That's social dance.
Yeah, but I forget.
A lot of the Puerto Ricans do the. I think they call it spiritualism, but it's like the same. It's like similar to.
But it's all over. You know, the hoodoo of New Orleans. You understand what I'm saying? All of these are remnants. You know, none of them are the pure religion, but they're all remnants.
But the thing about it over here is that you have a lot of influence from the Americas. There's a lot of like Haitian voodoo is very much.
Oh yeah, like I say, it's
Haitian
not,
voodoo is like half.
They're not. As I said, they're not pure. They're not the pure religion.
I'm saying that's why it's different because over here it's the Native American. It's a mixture of Native American and African. Like it's not just.
Now there were African Muslims here. You know, but I find very few references to them among people who, you know, I mean, most of what people say who are Muslims here is mythological. But I introduced you to my colleague, Alan Austin, who wrote a 700-page book called African Muslims in America, you know, which is a real story.
What he said, I didn't know this, that African Muslims are brought here during the slave trade.
Oh, yes. That's the reason. Yeah, but of course the Malians were Muslims. You know, people in Songhai were Muslims, you know, Fulani, the Hausas, you know, were Muslims. And the thing is, what Alan Austin did was he discovered that there was another whole tradition of slave narratives. I mean, all the slave narratives, you know, we are familiar with in English, but he found slave narratives in Arabic.
Oh, wow.
You understand what I'm saying? And they are very interesting. I mean, the way he happened to undertake this study. Alan Austin is a white guy who's married to a black woman who was a member of our department. We ended up hiring him, you know, in the Du Bois department. His daughter, his black daughter, when Roots came out, she was in school, and her teacher just dismissed Roots and said, you know, that was all fantasy because there were no Muslims brought over here in slavery. And so he decided, he checked with us and found out, you know, that one too. So he decided to do a study of it to see just what it was. And the result was this 750-page book, African Muslims in America. You know, now since then there's been a lot of research done on this. I saw a lecture on YouTube the other day. I didn't get to watch it, but it's a scholar who's doing a history of Muslims in America, going all the way back down to colonial times. So yes, there were African Muslims, you know, here, but the dominant religion, but Islam came to Africa. You know, from the Middle East, you understand? But the indigenous African religions has a similar character going all the way back to Egypt. You know, from Egypt with such things as divine kingship, you know, polytheism, that is many gods, you know, ancestor worship. All these things, you find them in African religion beginning with Egypt and right down through the Yoruba, you know? So there's no mystery about what our religious heritage was, you understand? If you read books like this book right there, get that. You see that yellow book there? Let me show this to you.
Yeah, okay, I'll get it for you.
Get it.
I'll get it. I also have a question for you. Here.
Yeah.
What the Faces of Gods?
If you want a real look at what the religions of black people in America, read this book here, Faces of the Gods. Yeah, read this, you know, by Robert Ferris Thompson, who was dean of African civilization at Yale. This is a very deep study of the religions of African peoples in the Americas. It's got pictures and everything.
Well, the thing about Robert Ferris Thompson, he's a white professor in Texas, and he's one of the world experts on the Congo. So I found out about him. He wrote a book on the tango.
That's it, the history of the dance of romance.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't know that the tango comes from the Congo.
That's right.
It actually comes
from
black people in Argentina, and they now what you see is this ballroom tango. The same thing with rumba. Like when you look at ballroom dance, you see rumba and samba. It's the ballroom version.
Yeah, I know, but that's it.
And samba the tango, rumba, all of those come from the Congo.
Let me tell you
And
something
they're very
about
different.
Robert Ferris Thompson.
Yeah, and there are black people who think. There are black people who think that you can't learn from white scholars about our history.
Yes, but which is ridiculous. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Look, from the very beginning, when Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of black history in the United States, the founder of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which created Black History Month. At first it was Negro History Week, and then evolved into the Journal of Negro History, which Dr. Carter Woodson founded. Now, Carter Woodson was a Harvard PhD, he studied in Berlin, just like Du Bois, so one of the best educated people of the 20th century. And the Journal of Negro History, which is one of the most important scholarly journals in American academia, especially in terms of documenting the history of black folk. From the very beginning, Dr. Woodson opened the pages to all scholars of all races, who met the test of scholarship. If their work met the test of scholarship, and this is a peer-reviewed journal, which means that other scholars review the articles that are published there before they're published, right? So he, from the very beginning, he saw this as an interracial enterprise, and that the standard was not whether you were white or black, but what the level of your scholarship, whether it met the standards, and that's the only standard that should be used when looking at scholarship. There are white scholars who have made fantastic contributions to our understanding of Afro-American and African history, and many of them Jewish. As a matter of fact,
I was about to say that.
W.E.B. Du Bois, more Jews than anybody else.
Yeah.
W.E.B. Du Bois, if you look at the preface of his great work, The World in Africa, which was published around 1935, he says in the introduction that what got him to studying the civilizations of Africa was that he heard a lecture by Dr. Franz Boas, who was professor of anthropology at Columbia University, one of the fathers of American anthropology.
Did Katherine Dunham study under him?
Yes, well, Zora Neale Hurston studied under him. And Katherine Dunham may have too. I don't know.
I find anthropology very interesting.
It is. She may have too. But Zora Neale Hurston, is the one who most famously studied on him. All of those folkloric studies that she did, and her novel, like The Eyes Were Watching God, and her folkloric study of Muse and Men, and the other one, Tell My Horse, which is her folkloric studies done in Haiti. These were all a result of her having studied with Franz Boas. He's the one that taught her the techniques, of gathering folklore, and encouraged her to do this field work and helped her get money to do it and everything.
Well, the thing that's very interesting to me is that, to me, with Zora Neale Hurston, I haven't spent time reading her stuff like that. But from what I know about her, she seems like what she does in talking, in what she does in showing, she's dealing with the folkloric tales and the stories and the speaking. But I'm saying that Katherine Dunham does that with the dancing. There's also folkloric dances.
Yes.
So I'm saying that because I feel like with the dances, people in the dance world, people don't really take folkloric dances seriously when they're high level stars.
Zora Neale Hurston writes about the dance though.
She does?
Oh yes, because these Haitian rituals, when these people become like her book, An Island Possessed.
No, that's Katherine Dunham.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's Katherine Dunham.
Yeah.
No, but Tell My Horse is Zora Neale Hurston.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Zora Neale Hurston, she talks about people being, possessed. When they talk about, spiritual, being ridden by the laws, the spiritual possession, this is very much intricately involved with dance. But Zora Neale Hurston, she came from an all-black town in Florida, Eatonville, which was not that far from where I grew up, and it was in opposite direction from Jacksonville, where James Weldon Johnson grew up. But when you see James Weldon Johnson's God's Trombones, and you see Zora Neale Hurston's Jonas Gordvine, their fascination with the Afro-American folk sermon and what have you. They both, Zora Neale Hurston, of course, her delving into folklore was much deeper. And of course, what you learn from folklore is you learn a lot about the mass psychology of the people who were not literate, people who didn't leave written records. You can tell a lot about how they saw the world from their folklore. This is why when
and with the dance, and I feel like you can sometimes find a lot of history.
yes,
That's undocumented.
this is how when Stanley Elkins, the historian Stanley Elkins, came out with his book Slavery: A Problem in American Institution of Intellectual Life, and in the chapter that he has called Slavery and the Sambo Personality, when he talks about the formation of the Sambo personality, which is best exemplified in popular culture by the character played by Samuel L. Jackson in Django Unchained. That's a classic representation of the Sambo character, which is what Clarence Thomas is, not Uncle Tom, but Sambo, right? Uncle Tom was a reputable figure compared to Sambo.
Yeah, explain the difference. I've heard you explain the difference between Sambo and Uncle Tom.
Well, it's very interesting because just this morning I was looking at a video of a black member of the Georgia legislature who made a speech on the floor of the Georgia legislature opposing a proposal by white Republicans to build a statue in honor of Clarence Thomas on the grounds, of the state capitol. And he got up and he said, in the black community, we have a name for people like Clarence Thomas, Uncle Tom, you know what I mean? He said, now, I don't know where Uncle Tom came from, whether it's a fictional character or what. Now, it was so absurd, Uncle Tom is a fictional character that comes from the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, a white female abolitionist. This book, this is the first blockbuster book in American history. This is the first runaway bestseller novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was so influential in turning people against slavery that when Abraham Lincoln met Harriet Beecher Stowe in the middle of the Civil War, the country was in the middle of the Civil War when he met her, and when they introduced her to Lincoln, Lincoln said, so you the little lady whose book started this big war. He blamed Uncle Tom's Cabin for the Civil War.
Wow.
That's how important it was. But Uncle Tom was a sympathetic character. Uncle Tom was a person who loved his people, who tried to help his people, but he was a slave. So whatever he did, he had to be obsequious. He had to pay, acknowledge the power of the master. But he was always scheming to help his people. This guy on the floor of the Georgia legislature got him and said, I don't know whether he's a fictional character or what, but he sold his soul to the white man, to oppress his people. That's not Uncle Sam. That's not Uncle Tom. That's not Uncle Tom's story at all. And this has been so misrepresented by so many people. Clarence Thomas is Sambo. Sambo is the Sambo personality. As kids, we used to talk about Little Black Sambo and whatnot. That was an insult. They had a cartoon character, like a minstrel type figure that white folks did. And it was a book that used to be in the elementary school. The elementary school children used to read Little Black Sambo.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Little Black Sambo.
Did they have that in the black schools too, or just the white schools?
Well, we saw it. Our teachers obviously didn't teach it. You understand what I'm saying? But we saw it. But the white folks, but the Florida Board of Education thought it was suitable for kids, right? Now, the thing is, when I talk about Sambo, I'm talking about Sambo as defined by Stanley Elkins in his scholarly scholarly book in the chapter Sambo and Slavery and the Sambo Personality. And here is how he defines it. He draws an analogy between the German concentration camp in which Jews were placed and the American slave plantation. Now, the analogy is faulty, in flawed in a fundamental sense, in that the concentration camps, the Nazi concentration camps, were death camps. They were more like what were called concentration camps when Andrew Johnson ordered all the East Coast Indians during the Trail of Tears, ordered them out to Oklahoma. That's where Hitler got the concept from. That's where he got the name concentration camp, was seeing the way the Native Americans were dispossessed and hurled out there and put in these camps in Oklahoma. But the Nazis' objective was the extermination of Jews. in the American South, that was not the objective of the slaveholders. Slaves were valuable units of production. That is, they were the basis of the whole economy of the South. So a slave owner would no more injure or kill a slave than he would injure or kill a prize farm animal.
And also, and also the slave trade ended here. Like it went on, and like you have places like Brazil or Haiti or Jamaica where they had so many Africans being brought here, but here the slave trade ended much sooner. I think that this least amount got brought here, so they definitely didn't want to kill off people.
Well, it ended in 1808. That's another story. But Gerald Horne, Gerald Horne, his book, The Deepest South.
But it kept on going?
It shows how a lot of American slaveholders left and moved to Brazil when slavery was outlawed here. Took their slaves and moved to Brazil. Because Brazil was the last country in the Western Hemisphere to get rid of slavery. Yeah. Slavery went on in Brazil until 12 years before the turn of the 20th century. 1888, the Golden Law of 1888. But in any case, what I was saying about the Sambo personality, what happened, what Stanley Elkins does is he looks at the diaries and what have you of slaveholders, and the description that the slaveholders give of some of their slaves, their attitudes, and he compares it with some of the descriptions of Jewish psychiatrists, because there were trained psychologists and whatnot who were interned in these concentration camps, like Pluto Bettelheim, who became one of the world's most influential psychologists, child psychologists and whatnot. He was an inmate in one of these concentration camps, and these psychologists, they recorded the deterioration of the personality under this extreme oppression. And one of the things that happened was that some of the Jews and these inmates, Jewish inmates in these camps, their personalities became so warped that they began to develop this strange, admiration for their Nazi guards, even to the point where they used to take their caps and try to make them look like the Nazi caps and that kind of thing. There's this complete deterioration of the personality that you end up wanting to ape your oppressor. You want to be and be like them, become totally obsequious, totally subservient. That's what he used these descriptions from the Jewish concentration camps and looked at what some of these slave masters had written in their diaries, and he drew an analogy between them and said this was basically the same class of phenomenon, that you could explain the Sambo character. Now prior to that, we had already developed an explanation for the Sambo personality by talking about survival mechanisms. We saw the survival mechanism, which it was for most Afro-Americans. Like, for instance, and again, when we talk about folklore, when you look at the folklore of the slaves, you look at their sayings. There was one saying that you found all over that slaves had. It was, got one mind for white folks to see, got another mind I know is really me, and they don't know my mind. Now, one of our first great poets, Paul Laurence Dunbar, raised this folk saying to high literature when he wrote his poem "While We Wear the Mask." This debt we pay to human guile. Let them think of let them think that we're happy while we wear the mask. So, but what Stanley Elkins was arguing was that this was real, that the Sambo personality was real. Now, there's no doubt that there's probably some people who did deteriorate to that point, but that was not characteristic of the majority of Afro-American slaves, and we know this because of the study of folklore, because the first person there was a whole response to Elkins when he published this. The most influential refutation came in a scholarly paper written by, at that time, a young historian at Northwestern University named Sterling Stuckey, Dr. Sterling Stuckey. He wrote a piece called "Through the Prism of Folklore," which was republished in the Massachusetts Review. And he was the first one was saying, if you want to know what the slaves really thought, look at their folklore, study their folklore. So he wrote this paper, "Through the Prism of Folklore," and then he ended up writing a full-scale study, a book called Slave Culture, in which he goes into this in detail and shows that we know what the slaves, what their thoughts were, because from their folklore. And of course, as Dr. Du Bois argued in his great essay of the Sorrow Songs, with his study of the spirituals, was that you could see, in the souls of black folk, you could see what slaves, how they felt about the experience in the spirituals.
And that's how I feel about the dances, because I am a huge student of folkloric dances. I always say I'm a student of dances of the African diaspora, but particularly in the Americas. Because there is a difference between the dances in the Americas and the dances in Africa. Like, you have a dance in Haiti called Igbo. Of course, there's a tribe in Nigeria called Igbo, but the Igbos in Nigeria don't do this dance. This dance comes from the experience that Haitians went through. The Igbos went through in Haiti. That's what this dance comes from. So it's like, there's so much history that I've learned from studying the dances. Even when, learning that when the Haitian Revolution happened, the slave masters in Cuba, they were afraid of that happening there. So
everybody was afraid. The slave masters here were scared to death.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things that led the Cubans, they allowed the African groups in Cuba to get in groups based on where they came from in Africa and do their dances and sing their songs, because they felt like, it'll keep them calm and keep them from revolting. So that was, and then there are dances, because I've studied Haitian folkloric dance and I've studied Afro-Cuban stuff, but even when you say Afro-Cuban, that's a huge umbrella of things that's under that, because you have Yoruba dances, but you also have Adara, you have Congo, you have Sofi dances, but you also have Haitian. There's Haitian Cuban voodoo. Like, it's different than the stuff they do in Haiti. Even the dances might have the same names that they have in Haiti, but the rhythm and the dance in Cuba is different. So there are dances that came to Cuba from the Haitians, and some of those dances are super aggressive. And it's like, with studying them, there's so many different things. Even with the how the Americas has an intertwined history. The Americas has a very intertwined history, but studying the folklore dances, there's so much. Even in terms of like you said, like, they would make fun of the slave masters. Like, there are dances where you have white people, making fun of black women's behinds, but then they're wearing fake butts, and then the black dancers would be dancing and making fun of them. So there was a lot of that.
Let me ask you a question. How much time do we have?
Well, I have to head if I'm going to head to the airport, I actually need to get up soon.
Well, I just want to know how much this time will take. Can you tell?
No, I started, it probably will go on for like another 40 minutes, but I just don't.
It can't be that long, because we've been talking for quite a while.
No, because it's an hour.
It's an hour. Well, no, it wouldn't be 40 minutes.
Because we started again like maybe around 4 o'clock or something like that.
Is it that late?
Maybe it's only 30 minutes. I don't know.
Well, if we started at 4 o'clock, it's only 4:14, so we've only been talking 14 minutes. It seems
it might be 30 minutes, but whatever it doesn't, I can't sit here that whole time.
Well, in any case, what I want to say is this. Mm-hmm. These conversations with me and my daughter, you should think of them as sort of like free form rap. You know what I mean? We start out with themes. I guess in the first ones we did, it was we stuck more to a particular theme. Like the first two we did on the Ukraine war, and then the ones on how the first rap record was made and played. And this is 50th anniversary of rap, so it was a good time to have that discussion, But this conversation here has been rather free flowing, and we have jumped across a lot of topics. That started out really talking about how I became, a revolutionary, and I was talking about the people who had been most influential in my early life, in my development as a radical public intellectual, and of course, as I said, Queen Mother Moore was the most influential. Of all of them. There were three most important people was Queen Mother Moore, the Reverend Dr. Leon Sullivan, and of course the legendary Judge Joe Rainey, who kind of started it all by putting me on the radio. That's what really started it off. I met all these other people as a result of that, and then the bookstore owners, Bill Crawford and Hakeem,
So the thing is, there's so much to talk about, and we could talk about it forever, so there's going to be a series of videos, because I also want to get into the founding of the Black Studies Department.
Oh, that's the way down. That's the way
yeah. Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. This is going to be a
long... We're just talking at the beginning of the 60s. All of what I'm talking about is took place in 1962, you know, and the founding of the first Black Studies Department, when we built, that was in 1969. That was at the end of the 60s.
And it's so funny because all I know is when I was a kid, you used to always say, I did a lot of shit before you were born. You used to always tell me that. I did a lot of shit before you were born.
Well, remember, I was almost 40 years old when you were born. I was
exactly.
just a few months away from my 40th birthday when you were born.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. So, like, this story, there's so much more to it because... We want to get into RAM and the Black Panthers coming out of RAM. Because a lot of people don't know that the Black Panther Party started in Alabama and how they actually started. You know,
we will talk about all that in the next sessions. Because I lived through all of this, you know, and the things that I'm talking about, a great deal of it is firsthand knowledge, and of course, you know, having been widely read, you know, and whatnot, I constantly refer to books. Mm-hmm. But I a lot of this is my own personal knowledge of what happened, things that I observed, like when I talk about the role that Queen Mother played in getting Malcolm to change the name of his organization from Muslim Mosque Incorporated to the OAU, the Organization of African American Unity.
And do you see that Malcolm's daughter is suing?
Yes, for $100 million, and I'm very glad because they were complicit in the assassination of Malcolm. I mean, this could not have happened if they had done their job, you know, because they knew everything. They knew that he was in danger of assassination because they had everything. Like Malcolm had said, he said, "Listen, they know exactly what's going on because they have thoroughly infiltrated the Black Muslim movement, and it's true, you know. And what has happened, you know, all of these records has come up, and then this deathbed confession of this agent, you know, from the police department here, who talked about the role he played. You know, how he served as a decoy, to get these guards away from and to pull these guards away from Malcolm, and made him vulnerable to assassination. They knew what was going to happen, you know, and they helped facilitate it. So yeah, they should. I hope they get all $100 million, but basically, I hope that they expose what actually happened here. But in any case, you know, we can discuss all of these things. But right now, what I want to say is that where we are now is us talking about how, you know, I met Queen Mother as a result of doing this radio show on my 20th birthday, May 25th, 1962. She took me under her wing. She introduced me to radical politics. She taught me about the world. You know, what was going on in the world. She taught me about, you know, the different, about imperialism, about colonialism, about the relationship between the so-called democratic countries that form NATO, their attitude toward African liberation, and the communist world's attitude toward African liberation, who supported the African liberation struggle. That's why right now, a lot of Africans are reluctant to join the United States in this boycott against Russia. You know, I mean, right now there's this big brouhaha because the South African government received Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, just recently. You know, and they're not joining this boycott, whatever. And of course, the Russians. Here's the problem that the United States and the so-called democratic countries and NATO, the problem they've always had in trying to deal with, get Africans to turn their back first on communist Russia, you know, and on the communist movement, is this. The Russians have never had any colonies in Africa, you know, ever. You understand? And and all of these so-called democratic, freedom-loving countries, they are the ones, you know, who colonized Africa. They're the ones who conducted the slave trade. They're the ones who have been the enemies, the murderers, the slavers of black people, not the Russians. The Russians have had no part in that, and the Chinese have had no part in it. You know, so they're going to have a very hard time getting the third world to support this, and that's to see what they don't tell you is that the majority of the world's population does not support the United States policy toward Russia.
I have a quick question. So there was somebody who asked if you ever knew or interacted with Amos Wilson or Buddy E. Wright or Del Jones. I've never.
No, Amos Wilson was a psychologist. You know,
yeah.
I've heard him talk. you know. But I never had, you know, any deal. First of all, by the time Amos Wilson really began to rise to prominence, you know, I was a journalist then and what have you. You know, I had left, you know, my radical activist days and whatnot. But I've heard him speak, but I never had any real dealings with him, no.
Okay. And
any of the other two people, I don't remember, I don't even know who the other two people are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've never heard of them. And I guess we can wrap up, but Queen Mother Moore introduced you to
John Henry Clark. She introduced me to Dr. Ben, who was not Dr. Ben then. He was Ben Jacquemin, and he was singing. He was a Ethiopian Jew, and that was in 1962. She introduced me to William L. Patterson, you know, who had been the editor of that devastating book, let's report, We Charge Genocide, in which they laid out the case that the American government was committing genocide against Afro-Americans. It is a book that is still available. You can get it online, and everybody should read it, and you can see this is the kind of stuff that these people, these so-called anti-critical race theory people, this is the kind of stuff they definitely do not want to read. I was reading some of the reviews of this book, you know, online on the Amazon site, and this one white woman was saying that I never knew any of this stuff. You know, nobody I know knows any of this. That this should be required reading for all kids in public schools. It should be, but it won't be, because it thoroughly devastates the facade, you know, the master narrative of American civilization. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They can't deal with it. You know, they can't handle the facts, and the facts are not in dispute here. You know what I'm saying? They have just decided, increasingly, in that punk down in Florida, that Cuban reject,
I do have to
DeSantis,
stop.
Is the leader in this. You know, they just are saying, we don't care what happened. We don't want to know. You know, and we're going to deny it, and we're going to keep our kids from learning. But the problem is, they can't keep them from learning about it now because we have the internet and it's everywhere. Yeah, you know? but also people have to be seeking it, because even though we have the internet, people are really dumb. And but you can stumble upon it.
No, you can stumble upon it, but you have to be seeking it out too, because there's also logarithms, and you know what I'm saying. Like you kind of have to be seeking. I'm just saying, like, people in theory, you think the internet shares all this information, but people in a lot of ways are dumber though, in a lot of ways. Because it's like, it depends on what you're looking for. And then you have search engines and logarithms that sometimes it's even hard to find the truth sometimes online. So there's a lot of politics with that. But yeah, but I understand. But I think you have to want to find it. It's certainly not as good as having it taught as a part of the curriculum in the schools. Yeah. Certainly not as good as that. But it's not possible to keep it as hidden as it has been in the past before the internet. You know, and it's not possible. It will be a part of the conversation. I think, you know, it's a part of the conversation, you know, and they can't stop it. Yeah. So we have to end because I have to.
All right. Well, you know, we'll continue.
No.
From here,
I got it. No, I'm telling the people watching that I'm going to be posting these videos on. I started a YouTube channel for our conversations, because we're going to be, like I said, having many conversations about a wide variety of things. And next month is what is it? Women's History Month. So there's a whole lot of more women that I actually want to speak about and go into.
Well, we should begin with Ida B. Wells. You know.
Okay.
Queen Mother Moore and Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells lives in Chicago. You know.
Yeah, so we can talk about Ida B. Wells. I want to talk about. I want to kind of get into a little bit of Catherine Dunham and Pearl Primus.
Well, you can talk about them. I know them basically from being a drummer, you know, and being around dancers, you know, like Alfida Derby, for instance, you know, who I almost married, you know, many years ago.
So we have many more conversations to go, but even along the lines of forming the first Black Studies Department and, you know, RAM, which the Black Panthers came out of. I want to talk about that more. We'll talk about, you know, your experiences in Malcolm more.
Yeah, we'll talk about all
So yes, we have a lot more. Yeah. So stay tuned. If you learned something from the video, please like it. Please share it, because I personally feel like there's too many stupid people out here talking, especially on the internet, because now the internet, it has its pros and its cons. Because you also have, it also gives a platform to a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about.
Oh yes.
And a lot of times they get the most, you know.
It's, you know, my friend Dr. Roderick Wilson is one of the people that designed architecture. And I tell him, I say, you gave us a double-edged sword. You know, on the one hand, you know, it gave me an independent voice. Yeah, but it also gave an independent voice to a whole lot of fools.
Yeah, it's the pros and cons. Yeah. Yep. So anyhow, I have to run, but thank you for listening. Like it, share it, and we'll see you in the next convo. Bye, people.